Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Thinking Fans Premier League podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. Today, we're joined by soccer analyst Harshal Patel. Also on the pod is professional footballer Dre Fortune. I'm host Chris Mumford. Bella ciao. We're sponsored by the Premier League Guide, a fabulous holiday gift for those mad about football. Moneyball for soccer and football, opposition analysis plus eye candy. The next update is available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. During Matchday 14, we had some blowouts at the top of the table and some draws at the bottom end with a lone upset of Burnley over Wolves. According to the pundits, Ole went from tactical simpleton to genius as ManUnited manhandled Leeds. Chelsea righted the ship against West Ham after some disappointing losses. Liverpool was on fire with Crystal Palace, the unfortunate victim. ManCity is quietly going about its business of winning, while Tottenham posted 2 losses after the curse of being anointed as league contenders last week. We have a quick chat on the upcoming EFL Cup as well as the Boxing Day matches. Harshal, we have to start off today's conversation about Liverpool. They had a rock and roll 7-0 win against the hapless Crystal Palace. What are some things we need to know about that match?
First of all, reports of Liverpool's demise were extremely exaggerated. And it's not just this match that tells us this. They have been extremely good over the last month or so, ever since that sort of shock 7-2 loss to Aston Villa during the first few weeks of the new season. They've actually done really well, and they've done so while having quite a few members of their team be injured, and some key players at that. Obviously, we all know Virgil van Dijk is injured and probably will miss the rest of the season. It'll be really a feat of recovery if he manages to come back before the end of the season. They don't have Thiago. He tested positive for COVID, came back, then got his knee injured in a tackle during the Merseyside derby, and that obviously Thiago was brought in to sort of change the way Liverpool play and give them more of a cutting edge in terms of creativity from midfield. Diogo Jota started the season off on fire, but even he's injured. He's out for, I think, nearly almost 2 months, 6 weeks or so. So they have had a bunch of injuries. Alisson has been absent for some games, but they've just kept on getting the results. And then this game shows up where they absolutely blew Crystal Palace away. And I thought some of the goals were excellent, and we can obviously drill a little bit more in. You can drill a little bit more in terms of detail, but they looked absolutely ruthless. Mo Salah came off the bench and I think scored 2 and set up another. So that just tells you that all these guys, people have said that, Liverpool's motivation could fall off because they've won the Champions League, they've won the Premier League in the space of 2 years. So, those motivation levels could fall, but I don't think that's the case with this squad. And obviously with Jurgen Klopp, he still wants to win as much as he can with this team. And we're going to see that. And that's why Liverpool are still going to be the team to beat this season.
Dre, what was your impression of the game? Were there a couple things that really stuck out for you?
Yeah. First and foremost, I was very surprised by the scoreline. Crystal Palace is a team that I've been enjoying with, some of their attacking options like Zaha and Eze specifically. But, after the game, the goal that really caught the highlight or the headlines was the Salah goal, the 7th one, where he kind of cut inside and bent the ball far post. But I was really interested in Firmino's 2 goals because in both situations he scores with just 2 touches. The first one, he's making a deep run, busting his behind to get into the box like all forwards do. The cross comes into the box and he takes an excellent first touch that puts him right in front of the goal. The keeper's got to make a decision and he just puts it in the corner. And then even with the second one, he, perfect movement, moving away from the defenders, kind of backing off towards the far post area, really. Salah plays him a ball, and with his first touch, he takes it across his body and eliminates the defenders. And then lovely little chip over the goalkeeper to finish. I think both of them were just really composed and excellent first touches in both situations in tight spaces that allow him to get a shot off and finish. So I was really impressed with those.
Do you get the sense that he feels like he's got his mojo back after the weekend before his goal? Is that
I'd say
a
so.
real thing with players?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, for any forward, anytime you score, the confidence meter just ticks up and up and up. Well, for anyone really, because that's obviously the most difficult part of the game. That's what everyone pays money for. So he's definitely gonna feel confident after that, and just gonna keep going in that direction.
Interesting. Well, Liverpool really took care of Crystal Palace in a big way. Let's turn our attention to the Southampton Man City match, where Man City got another, I get the sense, a workmanlike 1-0 victory over what I think is a really well constructed Southampton team. Harshal, any thoughts on Man City and Southampton or the match?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it was a pretty workmanlike victory in the sense that it wasn't City as we've seen them over the last couple of years with Pep in charge. And that's been the theme this season. They've not been as swashbuckling, they've not been as attacking, they've not created as many chances. And you don't get the sense that, they're going to hit teams for 4 or 5 as much as you would in earlier seasons. I mean, they have obviously scored 5 goals against Burnley already this season once, but they used to be able to, take teams apart at will. They've set the points records and the goal scoring record in the Premier League in, I think it was the 2018-19 season. So the 2017-18 season, my bad. So they've fallen off from those levels most definitely. And obviously we can see that in the table as well. They're still 8th and they're well behind Liverpool at the moment. But as we all know, Pep is an absolutely top class manager. They do have a game in hand, and you hope that once Sergio Aguero is fully fit and he's able to play 90 minutes twice a week, which could be hopefully the case in a couple of weeks or so, that you will start to see City score more goals. Although, and I've said this earlier on this podcast as well, I think the issue is more to do with the fact that they're not creating chances, because I mean, Aguero will be the guy to finish the chances, but you need to create them in the first place. And the chance creation is a lot lesser than it has been in previous seasons. And we've spoken about the reasons earlier as well. The fact that there's too much dependence on Kevin De Bruyne. There's not a lot of width, which means that all of the play is sort of shuffled or funneled into central areas, which makes it easy to defend against, which is not really how you've seen Pep play or Pep set out his sides to play. So those issues are still, I mean, they haven't gone anywhere. But yeah, I think Pep will be happy with the clean sheet and they get the 3 points on the board. In terms of Southampton, Danny Ings picked up an injury again, so we'll have to wait and see as to how serious that is. He's just come back from knee surgery. But Southampton were, again, I mean, you're not really going to be too upset about a loss to City, but I would expect them to be able to, pick up a few wins in the next few games and put themselves about towards the top end of the table.
What are your thoughts on Southampton? We got the sense that they were just going to be visiting the upper part of the table, but what's your take now?
No, I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to be challenging for the Champions League places, but they could most definitely make it to the Europa League. And it has been a crazy season. So, I mean, if one of the usual suspects does drop form or drop points, you can expect maybe in Everton, Southampton, Leicester, all of these sides are there who can take that opportunity and sneak into the top 4. Who knows? But they are a very well drilled and a very well coached side. Each player knows their role extremely well in that setup. They play the same style and same sort of formation every week, no matter what the opposition is. I mean, obviously there will be individual tweaks, but the overarching sort of tactical philosophy and theme stays the same. And Ralph Hasenhüttl has done a fantastic job with that. So players know what their roles are and what they're supposed to do during each phase of the game based on where other players are. And what that does is, in my opinion, when you have a system that's so well defined is that it allows players to play better. That because a lot of the work or the mental work has already been done for you in terms of you don't need to, worry about, hey, when I get on the ball here, do I pass to him or do I pass there, or is he in position? Because a lot of that has already been trained. So it's almost as if that, I need to do this now.
Right.
So that frees up the mind a lot,
Sure.
I think.
So Dre, have you played on many teams where the patterns of plays are really ingrained in, or have you tend to play more on teams where there's more improvised movements?
I tend to play more of like improvised, kind of just more freedom of movement,
Mhm.
just because of more so because of the personnel that we have. So like, the two wingers would be completely different. One would be more of a pacey kind of getting behind winger, and one would be more tucking inside, and you just kind of have to adjust to that. And I don't know, it's interesting. I think both are obviously have their pros and cons. I prefer the kind of improvised kind of structure. I think it's a little bit more fun and allows for a little bit more creativity and freedom of play. But yeah, I mean, even to speak on Southampton a little more too, I think they're going to continue to fall just a little bit. I mean, I like how they've played, especially in the game. I think they did create a couple of chances. I thought they would have scored one, especially in the first half. I thought they would have equalized, but I don't know. I thought City created a lot of chances as well. I was kind of, I don't know if you believe that they're still not creating chances, Harshal, but I thought that they created about 3 or 4 clear-cut opportunities, or maybe they were overpassing a little bit, or like there was the one that Bernardo had that he should have shot that Sterling rolled in, and he squared it across to Mahrez. And there was one De Bruyne fed him, I think it was in the second half as well, where he kind of took a touch. He was right in front of the goal and took a couple extra ones and then didn't get much power in the shot. So I don't know. I think it's moving in the right direction so far. I think, it's just a matter of time, and getting Aguero back will be huge.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that, and I think for players to be truly creative, they need to have someone to receive the ball. And I just think that Aguero can do that. Or the Aguero version of a year and a half ago can do that. The new Aguero, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that he can do that after injury, because no one wants to see a career diminished, well, with an injury like he's had. So, well, let's turn our attention to uh, Everton beat Arsenal 2-1. Arsenal has had a difficult go in this particular week, and I imagine we could do an entirely separate pod on that. Before we go down the Arsenal rabbit hole, any quick notes on Everton, Harshal?
I thought they did well to recover from. I think they lost 3 games in a row before this, so they've done well to come back from that sort of spell. But yeah, Everton are again one of those sides I spoke about as being around the European places, and if not, I mean, again, Champions League depends on form, and both their form and the form of the other the big sides, but they should definitely be in the shout for um, the Europa League places. And apologies, I misspoke earlier. They've actually, I think they've beaten Chelsea, Leicester, and Arsenal in the last 3 games. So the last 3 games have actually been a good. Not that this game was a break from a bad run. They've actually been on a good run over the last 3 games. So that actually tells you that Ancelotti is sort of improvising and making things work, because we've spoken about it before. He's had a lot of injury concerns. Some of those players are starting to come back now. Seamus Coleman was, I think, on the bench for this one. So hopefully he'll be back in the lineup soon. He's the captain. He's one of the right backs. And they've lacked width because they've not had any fit fullbacks over the last month or so. So the hope is that they can set that going again. Although I will say that I think James Rodriguez has dropped off a lot from what we saw in the first month or so, where he lit up the Premier League. I thought he was one of the best players in the league in the first month, but he's not hitting those heights. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking to see as to whether James can sort of maybe recapture his form as the season progresses. But Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been superb. He's been scoring goals over the last 3 games. I thought he's got 3 assists now, even though he hasn't scored. So yeah, Everton, I think they've managed to turn the tide over the last 3 games, and let's see if that continues.
Yeah, it's funny. I think my recollections of Everton is similar to yours, and I think that's in large part because they've been inconsistent. They've been on a nice 3-team run. They tied Burnley before that. They lost to Leeds. They beat Fulham 3-2, and then they lost to Man U, and they lost to Newcastle, right? So it's hard to get a sense of will the real Everton please stand up. We've had 3 good games. Richarlison, I really feel like is if he finds his form, I think it's going to help open up Rodriguez a little bit, because I'm going to stick with you can only have a creative pass if you have a great passer and someone to receive that pass. So let's turn our attention to Arsenal, and I'm going to let you help us unpack that piece, as you have the most emotional investment in Arsenal.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's much more to really be said than what we've said on the last few podcasts. It's just, at this point, it's you just kind of looking ahead and thinking, what are they going to be able to change, and where are the solutions coming from? And I don't know, this game in particular, I think they were a little bit unlucky to go down 1-0. I mean, the first goal was a deflection that ends up in the back of the net, and then they they kind of clawed their way back a little bit through a penalty. And then set pieces are an issue for every team, and they struggled to defend one right before halftime and go down 2-1. And then I didn't really see much in the second half. I mean, they created maybe 2 or 3 chances, you'd say, but I think for me, as I was watching the game, my biggest thing was I just felt like they weren't getting enough numbers forward and enough numbers in and around the box to kind of create opportunities. I mean, if you've got the personnel who are going to create when it's just 2 or 3 guys around the box and they're going to, make a goal that way, I think that works, but I'm not sure that they have that right now. And that's a big issue. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of Ozil.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I jump in on that. I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I see this cross, and I see at least 3 or 4 defenders in one red jersey, but in both the EFL Cup game as well as the Premier League game on the weekend. That ain't going to work, right?
No.
I mean, yeah, maybe a single-digit percentage of the time, but we know that crosses in general only score 2% of the time in the Premier League. So you're reducing that even more. So that creative feature is really what's missing.
Yeah.
Harshal, do you think they should make a coaching change now or not?
That's a tough one, but what I will say is that as a Man United supporter, this what's happening at Arsenal right now is like takes me back to the 2014-15 sort of time at United when Louis van Gaal was manager. And the reason I say it's similar is because, I mean, even during that time at Man United, United would have the ball for ages, but I mean, do nothing with it, sterile possession, no chance creation, no, there was no danger to the opposition's goal, to be honest, in a lot of games, even though United would have 55-60% of the ball. And it's very similar to what I'm seeing on the pitch with Arsenal, where, and we've spoken about this earlier, they top the metric for passes per shot as well for the Premier League right now.
Yeah.
Even though they know that it's not like they're making the most passes per 90 in the Premier League. No, they're about 4th or 5th in that metric. But it's just that they're taking such few shots that they're top for passes per shot. And similarly, another sort of similarity is that at United during that time, fans were looking to some of the younger players coming through to provide a spark. Marcus Rashford broke through the next year. Anthony Martial, who was signed as I think he was 20 years old or 19 years old at the time he was signed. Jesse Lingard came through the academy and had a big impact over the next couple of seasons. So it's a similar thing at Arsenal as well, where the fans are looking at the likes of Bukayo Saka, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, maybe Emil Smith-Rowe, all these guys to come in and provide a lift because the established players aren't really doing much. So given that I can see those parallels, I do think that maybe there might be a need to make a coaching change sooner rather than later. Of course, this is obviously an external view. We don't know what the guys in the boardroom at Arsenal think. They have obviously given Arteta a lot of support, even over the last week or so. But as much as yes, there probably needs to be a change in terms of the squad, in terms of transfers, but they could also possibly
So,
maybe do with a
Harshal, let me
change
jump in
in
this.
yeah.
What's more important, coach, squad adjustments, or both? What do you think needs to happen?
I'll go back to what we've spoken about earlier on the podcast about pragmatism versus dogma. I think, especially in a time like this, you need to be pragmatic, and Arteta is not doing that. A lot of the players who Arsenal have, their strength is, or their strengths would be, magnified if Arsenal actually played on the counter attack. Think about it. You've got Aubameyang, you've got Pepe, you've got Willie. If Maitland-Niles plays in a sort of high position, he's extremely fast. Bukayo Saka can be rapid on the counter attack. So
And keep in mind, they were doing this before, like, at the end of last season and getting results when they beat Liverpool and City and whatnot. But yes, I agree.
Yeah, no,
so
I can't help but jump in on that. I mean, he had a clear vision for the counterattack, and then things stopped working, and so he got really pragmatic. And now he seems like he's experimenting with different things right now, and he's got moved towards pragmatism. And now fans are kind of coming at him for that, which I don't know if is necessarily fair. Dre, what's your take on coach, squad adjustments, or coach and squad adjustments? Those three options. What does Arsenal need to do?
I think for me, I think at this moment in time, it's squad adjustments, strictly because when you bring in a coach, he's got his own identity that he tries to implement, and I'm not too sure that all the players are. I mean, like you said, Harshal, I don't think when you say that the strength of the players are more suited to counterattacking, I don't think that's his long-term style of play. I don't think that's what he wants to do. I think he just did that because it worked. So, I mean, I think they've got to get to a point where he's got the players that he's happy with to play his style. And I think he started it. I mean, for example, the center back, Gabriel came in and he's more suited to how Arteta wants to play out the back and whatnot, different stuff like that. So I think right now that's probably the priority. And obviously we look ahead to January and see what happens in that department. But I don't know. I'd like to at least give him a season for him to, try to implement what he's trying to do and see how it goes, as opposed to just coming in and trying to win, doing something that he's not, because he's still finding himself as well. I mean, he's not a very experienced manager himself. So it's tough.
Yeah, I'd say my take is keep him in there, right? I mean, the truth is Unai Emery was a great coach as well. He just had some timing was off and some squad issues. By the way, Unai Emery's crushing it in Villarreal. They're in fourth place.
Exactly.
In
Yeah.
La Liga. So it's you can shoot the coach, but that's not going to be what fixes the problems. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that they are a Bruno Fernandes equivalent away from the pieces clicking together. Will they be contending for the league next year if they get that? No. But let me tell you, when those youngsters get another year or two with some creative support to that, and Aubameyang can still stay durable, which is a big if, right? But Vardy, Cavani, Giroud, all those folks are like, okay, well, yeah, maybe there is something to that. And you see what Ibra and Lukaku are doing over in Serie A. So I hope that they don't let him go. I think that, I help me out on this, Harshal, but did Arteta and Ozil actually play? Were they on the same roster together? So they've got some history. And I
pretty sure
don't remember, but I think they might have played one season together.
Well, I'm using my reliable source, which is my 16-year-old son, who's a rabid Arsenal fan, and he looked it up and said that to be the case. But that's something we'll double check on. But I feel like something must have happened. Somebody said something about someone's wife, and all bets were off, right?
No, I mean, because when Arteta first came in November, I think Ozil played.
He was playing, yeah.
Yeah, he played. I think he missed one game. He played every Premier League game from the start. Yeah. It's basically something's happened during lockdown, and I mean, it could be whatever Ozil said about China and all of that, and that's what the rumor is, that he's basically, Arteta has been told from the board that he can't play him or something like that. We don't know, speculation, and obviously nothing's been put out officially, but I don't, obviously, as you said, it's not to do with football, because Ozil it's we've spoken about it so many times that Arsenal are crying out for a player like Ozil, and he's sitting at home. He's become their social media manager. He's the guy putting out polls on his Twitter about the game and
That's
asking
right.
fans about how the game went when he
Hey,
should be playing.
He's going to win the Ballon d'Or for social media management, I think,
Yeah.
all the leagues. So
they played 3 seasons together, by the way. I just checked.
okay, super. So so they've certainly got some history, and we'll probably know in about 15 years when Arteta does his biography. But let's turn our attention. We talked down in the lower league parts of the table. Fulham tied with Newcastle, Brighton tied with Sheffield. There were some red cards associated with that. Burnley actually beat Wolves, which is a bit of surprise, but you could only imagine that Wolves could have so much juice after losing Jimenez and just with a very comparatively small squad size that they have. So you would expect those sort of things to happen. What I'd really like to turn our attention towards is the Leicester Tottenham game. That was some really didn't know what to expect there. Dre, what were your observations in that game?
So Mourinho's kind of done it again. But to be fair, I mean, I felt like Tottenham were a bit unlucky. The 2 goals they conceded, one was an own goal, I believe. The Vardy tried to head it back across and it hit Alderweireld and went in. The first one
Was a penalty.
The penalty, right. And I mean, it is a penalty, but it's just stupid. I mean, I can't believe that at that level that's the kind of penalty they're giving up. But I mean, yeah. So I think they're a bit unlucky to concede those 2 goals, and they definitely had their chances, particularly in the second half, to kind of try to claw their way back into the game. But Leicester's proven to be an issue, and they have been for a few years now. And I think that's just how it's going to be. I mean, Tottenham's going to have to figure out a way to beat all of the teams. So, for example, if they're sitting in against Manchester City, they've figured out that's how they want to do that. But then how are they going to approach the teams who are sitting in against them? I think that's one of the biggest things that they need to figure out now. So.
That's what I really liked about watching this, because I think Leicester has, as you know, has literally won a title sitting in and doing the counter.
Mm-hmm.
And where they brought some nuance to their game is the expansive attacking football, which is just like, wait a minute, how can you sit back and have that identity, but then also be able to play the expansive football at the same time? And I see Tottenham as kind of like, I've talked about this before, the Rocky One character, where they're a southpaw, right? They're used to playing expansive football, and then Mickey or Mourinho says, hey, you got to start hitting right and playing counter attack football. And the idea is Mo could have it both ways with a predominant counter attack. But the thing is that Tottenham I don't see a huge evidence that they are being expansive in nature. So I just see the trajectory of the Leicester Tottenham development. They could be a parallel trajectory where Leicester is a little bit farther ahead. I like Leicester in their youth. I like the fact, I still don't know if I can completely believe them yet, right? I think everyone has a degree of skepticism. I thought that game was really very I enjoyed the expansiveness of it. I think that Tottenham, pundits like to anoint who's going to be the rightful competitor to Liverpool, and Tottenham is not that team, I don't think. Harshal, what's your take on this?
Couple of quick tactical observations. One of which so Jamie Vardy actually spoke after the game about how they actually wanted Spurs. So Leicester actually last season were one of the most high pressing teams in the league, but due to the way this season has panned out, obviously short turnarounds, a lot of games, injuries, COVID, all of that, they don't press as much anymore. And especially because they've lost a lot of defenders to injury. So Brendan Rodgers has moved to a back 3 and he plays a lot deeper. But Vardy actually said post-match that in this game against Spurs, it was a plan for them to sit back, allow Spurs and the Spurs backline to sort of come up the pitch towards the middle half, or basically in a mid block of, Leicester were playing in a mid block where instead of pressing Spurs in their own half, they would press the Spurs defenders once they were close to the half line. Why? Because they knew that the two Spurs centre backs, Dyer and Alderweireld, are absolutely, they're not fast by any stretch of the imagination. And you can just imagine, if you win the ball back on the halfway line and James Maddison is able to play a pass through to Jamie Vardy with the full half to run into, and he's got Alderweireld and Dyer chasing, he's not going to catch them. They're not going to catch him. So that was the plan, was what Vardy said, that we wanted to sort of entice them up the pitch and then win the ball back so that we have the space to counter into. And that did work. And that shows, again, I've spoken about my admiration for Brendan Rodgers on the podcast earlier as well. I think he's an absolutely fantastic coach in terms of these sort of things, picking the weaknesses of other teams and setting up his team to exploit that. And he did that here with the lack of pace in Spurs defense. With regard to Spurs, as we spoke about the fact that they want to be a bit more expansive, or I don't know if they want to. I think fans want them to, or that's the only way they'll be able to beat deep lying teams. I think they do have the solution. Mourinho's largely been playing with Moussa Sissoko and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg in midfield as the two central midfielders. And then he's had Tanguy and Ndombele playing as a number 10 behind Harry Kane. And then obviously Son Heung-min and Steven Bergwijn have been the wingers. One solution to that creativity issue is to play Giovanni Lo Celso instead of Sissoko, or rather basically move Lo Celso to number 10 and play Ndombele deeper, because he is brilliant. Ndombele is absolutely brilliant in terms of breaking a press, dribbling with the ball at his feet and passing, and Lo Celso is the same. The only issue is that they lose out a bit on defensive cover, which is something Mourinho will not want to give up. But the solution is there. They don't need to go out and buy someone. So if they do want to, against the Crystal Palace, for example, I think it would have been much better if they started both of them. They drew that game 1-1, right? So, start both of them. Don't play Sissoko. You have Højbjerg shielding the defense, but then you have Lo Celso and Ndombele to play the passes rather than it just being Ndombele also as a number 10, which is not his natural position. He's much more suited to a deeper role. So I don't think Mourinho is going to make that change, but it's there. It's there in the squad if he wants to.
He even has Lamella's return too. I have the Stoke game on the television right now. Lamella's just subbed on, so he's a phenomenal an option to have to try to break teams down in the final third and whatnot.
Yeah, I think I'll bring up some really good points. Leicester has the toolkit to be expansive. The reality is Tottenham had possession 52%, so they edged Leicester on it. Leicester took 15 shots, only had 4 on target, while as yet Tottenham had 8 and only 3 were on target. And the XGA was 1.8 for Leicester and 1.0 for Tottenham. So pretty close game. I think that y'all get hit it on the nose there in terms of how much parity there was with that, and maybe luck. Well, certainly, particularly with the PKs and things like that, it's a little bit of noise can completely change the outcomes of the matches. So let's talk a little bit about that Chelsea West Ham, the 3-0 win over West Ham. Harshal, what was your take on that game?
As you said at the top of the podcast, it was a good sort of return to winning ways for Chelsea. They've struggled a little bit over the last couple of weeks or so. They lost a couple of games. But again, this was a game that was actually decided a little late on. Tammy Abraham scored those 2 goals towards the end of the game to make it safe. Obviously they'd scored early on, but West Ham was still in the game till Tammy scored, and I think it was about with 10-15 minutes to go that he scored those 2 goals. But yeah, I think Chelsea struggled because relatively struggled, but they will probably struggle maybe in the weeks to come because they've lost now both their starting fullbacks. It remains to be seen as to how long both of them are out, but Reece James has a knee issue, and even though we're reading that he doesn't need surgery and that surgery will be only a last resort, he will still be out for a few weeks. Ben Chilwell limped off in this game towards, I think, in the first 10 minutes or so with an injury as well. And almost all of Chelsea's width comes from their fullbacks, especially when they've played James and Chilwell, because they're both really attacking fullbacks. Instead of them, you have Cesar Azpilicueta on the right, who is much more defensive, and Emerson, who is, I mean, he's just not that good. He's not as good as Chilwell. So it could be a problem for Chelsea in terms of the attacking, the whether they're able to carve open teams a lot more, because if you're not able, again, it's the same thing that I've spoken about with City, where if you're not able to provide width, all your play will be narrow and sort of compressed, and you won't be able to stretch the opposition, especially if they're playing in a deep block. So let's see how that goes over the next few weeks for Chelsea, whether they're able to cope with without those two guys.
Interesting. Dre, Tammy Abraham had two very nice goals, I thought. The timing was right. The runs were right. I know we can't speculate too much on this, but he has been sitting on the bench while Giroud has played, had some starts. Any thoughts on how those dynamics work based on your own personal experiences?
Well, I mean, specifically as a striker, when you're not playing very much, the only thing on your mind when you get onto the pitch is to score. So he'll be elated to have scored twice. I mean, strikers don't care how they get them; they just care that their name's on the score sheet. So yeah, I mean, that was obviously going to be his goal from the beginning, just to kind of get himself on the score sheet and work his way back into the team. And I'm sure he respects the player that Giroud is, and he's been involved with the club for a while, waiting for his turn. So I mean, he's probably got the patience and whatnot that's required. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure he'll just be happy to have gotten on the score sheet, really.
Okay, good. Well, let's turn our attention to probably the most enjoyable match of the week, which was the Man U Leeds game. I think it was probably the neutral's most favorite game of the week. And I guess if you are a Man U fan, probably your favorite game of the week. Harshal, as you are one of a Man U fan, what's your lens at looking at the game?
I mean, it was a crazy game. We had, I think, 40 shots. United at 23, Leeds at 17. That's incredible for one match of football over 90 minutes, right? So, as you said, amazing entertainment and all of that. But if you look a little deeper, I think it was a great sort of it's a 90-minute match which showed us a lot about what the two managers are. Because on one hand, you've got Marcelo Bielsa, manager of Leeds, who will not change the way he plays no matter who he plays. And we've seen that. He played this way against Liverpool, against ManCity. He's done that against United as well. And I mean, Leeds, they almost scored a third, I remember, in this game towards, I think it was in stoppage time, where Jack Harrison shot wide of the far post when I think he should have scored. Which just tells you, even in the 93rd minute or so, the 6-2 is the scoreline, but they're still going for a third, right? And that's his philosophy, that I don't care what the score is. I don't care what the time of the match is. You're going to attack. It's all out attack, or basically we're not going to give up till the final whistle and we're going to keep attacking. And we've seen that in other games where, 94th, 95th minute Leeds have got 7 players in the box, for example. On the other hand, you have Ole, who, I mean, the big criticism of his tenure at United has been the fact that there's no overarching sort of style or one clear tactical philosophy that fans or pundits or whoever, football observers have been able to see. But he's shown that he's very good at planning for specific opponents and for specific games and setting the team up to do well in those games. We've seen that in the Champions League this season against Leipzig, against PSG. We've seen that in the league against City on multiple occasions last season. And in this game as well against Leeds, I mean, Leeds go man-to-man. Everybody knows this. All over the pitch, in open play, Leeds go man-to-man, with Liam Cooper being the spare man at the back. And United exploited that perfectly. The way to exploit man-to-man marking, or to get away from man-to-man marking, is to play quick passes, one-touch passes, but also to basically have a lot of movement going on so that you can create space. Because obviously, if you're being tracked by a marker, if you run into, so for example, Bruno Fernandes did that really well, where as the number 10, it was Calvin Phillips, the defensive midfielder, who was tracking him, but Fernandes made sure he was covering the width of the pitch. So Phillips would have to follow him to the flanks, which would open up that central space. And then that's basically how the first 2 goals were scored, because Fernandes had vacated that central space and Phillips was forced to follow him. McTominay had the space to run into and score. And we saw that again multiple times for his own goal as well. He had dropped deep, dragging a player with him, which opened the space for Martial to make the run into, and so on and so forth. So I thought Solskjaer set his team up perfectly. And this was actually a brilliant game for United to play, because their style fit perfectly with the way Leeds play in terms of being able to overpower it. But yeah, it's obviously a 6-2 win will always give you confidence, especially against a good team like Leeds. It's also done away some of the damage from the 6-1 loss to Spurs at Old Trafford earlier this season in terms of goal difference. So that's also another positive. But yeah, I think it was a great day. But I'd actually love to learn from Jay in terms of, I spoke about Bruno's movement, right? So as an attacking midfielder, I mean, you're normally sort of expected to impact the game through your work on the ball, but here it was Bruno's movement off the ball that sort of created the space for his teammates. So how does that work in terms of how do you work on that in training, or even in a match situation? How do you sort of have that instinct to be able to do that? So because Dre plays the position.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just game intelligence, just understanding what's going on and what's needed from you in those moment in times. And I'm sure they worked on it, because you could see that as Bruno's moving out of certain spaces, runners from deep are running in to kind of fill those gaps. And I think that interchange and those movements amongst the midfielders, or even, with forwards dropping into the spaces, I think that's perfect. That's what you need to beat a man marking team in the middle of the field. So usually when, a player like Bruno, as you said, you expect him to directly influence the game in terms of playing final passes and getting assists or scoring goals or whatnot. I think it's just as easy to affect the game off the ball, as you can see with his movements there, whether it's, moving off to the side of the field, dropping a little bit deeper, runs in behind, whatnot. And I've really appreciated throughout the season, really, his work ethic off the ball. But I think in this game in particular, was really highlighted.
Trey, what did you see from Leeds side? Were there any things you're like, wow, I'm going to use that, or anything novel to that, or is it primarily just work rate driven?
I think it's primarily work rate driven. I mean, obviously they have a system that they use, and you can always admire the system, but yeah, I mean, it's primarily, they're going to go and they're going to work. And then when they win the ball, they have a particular style of play that they like to implement, which is always nice to watch as well. So, I mean, Leeds they figured out how to entertain people for sure. I hope they figured out the results piece. And I was going to say, I mean, obviously winning 6-2 is huge, but I don't want Man U to get a little, too carried away with it, because we've seen Leeds struggle with the results over the course of the season. So,
well, I mean, if you look at the records they've had, Leeds, guess what? They've lost against teams in the top 5 and 6.
mm-hmm.
They've beaten teams that are below them, and they've scored a few upsets on teams that are kind of anywhere between 8 and 12 and 13. So, I think there's already a call from pundits that Leeds may not make it through the league, or they're going to get relegated. And it doesn't ring true to me. They're kind of losing against the teams they're supposed to lose against, and they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. And the reality is that talent matters, and teams like Man U have a whole lot more money than Leeds do. And when you have a 1v1 situation, Fernandes or Rashford, they're going to go to town on probably a above average championship defender, right? Which is kind of where Bielsa has been able to turn those by turning them into incredible work rate machines. So that it's almost like they have 12 players on the pitch because of so much running that's happening. So I'm not ready to give up on Leeds yet. I'm not ready to anoint Man United as the rightful contender to Liverpool, because I think we're going to have quite a few twists and turns, and we know it's going to be the usual suspects, right? It's going to be Chelsea, Tottenham, Man U, possibly Liverpool, right? So that's going to make for a heck of an interesting season, though. You at some point Liverpool is going to have to lose its mojo a little bit. It can't go on the rest of the season with the mojo it's got going on. Oh, wait a minute, they just did that last year, so it'll be interesting to see where.
And the season before, actually. I mean, they got 97 points the season before last year. So.
Right. So, well, we've got some interesting matches this weekend. Speaking of actually, Man U, if they're going to hold on to that mantle as legitimate Premier League contender, they're going to have to beat Leicester City, which which is being broadcast at a very un-American time at 7:30 in the morning on Saturday. But a game worth getting up on. Harshal, what are things you're going to look for in that game?
Again, Leicester, it's going to be a good game because I'm really interested to see how Brendan Rodgers sets up the team to counter some of United's threats. And similarly, again, how, for example, I mean, I spoke about how Leicester and Vardy sort of set up to exploit Spurs' lack of pace in the centre backs. United, I mean, if Lindelof and Maguire are the ones who will play, which is most likely, they're not the fastest either, So I can easily see Vardy getting away from them as well if he's given space to play in behind. So I'm interested to see how how Solskjaer makes that disadvantage go away. I could potentially see Nemanja Matic playing as a sort of shield. I'm not saying he's fast, but just because he offers more protection to the back line. Or alternatively, he could, Solskjaer could go with the Fred McTominay pivot, which has done well in big games, which is the one he played against Leeds as well and in other big games. So, for all we might not see Paul Pogba start either, this weekend. So, but it will be a close game. I think it'll be a good watch, and maybe just shading it 2-1 to United, but that's largely down to the fact that United have the better players. But yeah, it could go either way. I'll go for a 2-1 win to United, but it could go either way.
Dre, how do you think the game flow will happen?
That's an interesting one. I was just thinking about that as Harshal was speaking. I imagine Manu will probably have more of the ball, but I don't know if that'll fare well for them necessarily. I mean, I think that's what Leicester will want, so that they can try to hit him on the counter. And I kind of imagine that Manu's going to have it in about the middle third area, and then around the final third, not really create much. They'll create a few chances. Obviously, they have phenomenal players, but I don't know if they'll have many clear-cut opportunities. And I think Leicester's going to defend well and look to hit him on the counter attack. Harshal said the 2-1 was because Man U has the better players. I think it's because he supports Man U, but yeah, I'll go for Leicester. I'll go for Leicester. Maybe 1-0 actually. Yeah, 1-0 Leicester. Jamie Vardy.
I think that I see 2-1. It could go really either way, and if I have to commit, it's probably Man United. I'm a pure neutral on this game. I think difference makers, you have to trot out the usual suspects. I think Bruno Fernandes on this. I'd like to see what James Maddison and Harvey Barnes can do, because Vardy's going to get so much attention. I know that Maguire and Vardy have a relationship from before on the national team, so a lot of attention there. So be interesting to see what the youngsters can do on the Leicester side. So that's going to be a very enjoyable game, and assuming that everyone in America can wake up at 7:30 in the morning. We've got.
And
go
just
ahead.
Another point. I mean, not just from the national team. Maguire was at Leicester. I mean, he was sold to United a couple of seasons ago for 80 million, but he's played. I think he played 2 or 3 years on that Leicester team with all of these guys. So yeah, I mean, Vardy probably knows all about him in terms of his strengths, his weaknesses, how to exploit them. So that's honestly why I do think. I mean, it'll be very difficult to stop Leicester scoring. Probably very difficult to stop Vardy scoring.
And just to add as well, I mean, Manu obviously plays today. They play Everton, and just seen the lineup. So Maguire starting, Pogba, Bruno Fernandes. So it'll be interesting how much they play and then how that factors into the game in 3 days. I guess we'll see.
I will also say that Schmeichel is also going to be a real difference maker to watch. He's just been in magnificent form as of late. So those are probably the 3 or 4 players that I'd be paying attention to the most. How about that Arsenal Chelsea game? What are you going to be what's going to happen, Dre?
Chelsea's going to win 3-0.
Chelsea's going to win 3-0. Are we just going to move on from there? Kind of.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, Arsenal's had their success against the bigger teams, kind of playing on the counter, soaking up pressure, and going about it that way. If they choose to do that, then it's possible that they have a game. And I don't know. I'd love to say that they might win, but I can't find the words. But yeah, I mean, I think that would probably be their best way to go about it. Otherwise, I think Chelsea will just carve them open and score a few goals.
How about yourself, Harshal?
Yeah, I mean, as Dre said, I think this is the game for Arsenal to sit back and defend and hit Chelsea on the counter again, because as I said earlier, Chelsea are not going to have their first choice fullbacks, and they have looked a little vulnerable to the counter-attack. I mean, not as much this season. They were a lot more vulnerable last season, but some of those issues are still there. So it's basically, at a time like this when I think Arsenal need to get the results and get the points, I think Arteta should be open to, going back to a counter-attacking style rather than trying to play a more possession-oriented one, because clearly some of the players, their strengths are playing on the counter and playing at pace. So, I mean, I don't know if he will do that, but I think that's the only way they will have any success. Because, I mean, even if you look at Arsenal's schedule, after this game, they play Brighton, they play West Brom, they play Newcastle in the FA Cup, and they play Palace, and they play Newcastle again in the league. After those 5 games, they've got a really tough run. They play Southampton, United, Wolves, Leeds, City, Leicester, Burnley, and Spurs. And this is obviously going all the way up to March. But after these 5 games, they've got about 10 games where I can't see them winning maybe more than 2 or 3. So they do need to pick up the points right now in these 4 or 5 games. Going by current form, obviously, if they improve and they're able to pick up points in those tougher games, that's great. But going on current form, I think his Chelsea game's a gimme. I mean, if it happens, it happens. But after that, I think the next 4 or 5 games against some of the weaker sides are the ones where they need to pick up points.
I am going to keep my eye on that Aston Villa Crystal Palace game, see how Crystal Palace bounces back. But I like the body of work that Aston Villa has really been able to put together so far this season. I think their game is easy on the eye, and we'll see where things go with that. ManCity is going to play Newcastle at home, so I think that's going to be a fairly predictable game. Everton's going to play Sheffield United. Leeds is going to play Burnley, which we'll see how we know how Burnley plays and we know how Leeds play. So that's about as clear cut from a dogma perspective as we can get. West Ham's going to play Brighton. Liverpool is going to play West Brom. And I think Tottenham Wolves game, even though Wolves have lost a match, they're just such a tough out when going against the big 5 or 6 teams. What are some of the key pieces you're going to be looking at in this, Harshal?
Wolves have gone back to a back 3. We've spoken about it earlier in the podcast, where they played with a back 4, having not done so ever in the last 2 or 3 years or so that Nuno's been in charge. It's almost exclusively been a back 3. They played a back 4 for, I think, 3 games or 4 games, and now they've gone back to a back 3. So I don't know. I'm looking to see what sort of system Nuno puts out. Also, I mean, I think it's a little bit down to the fact that they don't have Jimenez, so they don't have that sort of focal point striker up front, because Fabio Silva's 18. I mean, and Nuno has said that it was never the plan to throw him in, into the starting lineup and at such an early stage, even though they bought him for quite a bit of money in the summer. But the plan was always to blood him and sort of allow Jimenez to take the major workload and to give him minutes off the bench. So he's actually moved back to back three, I think, because he doesn't have that sort of central striking option. So he's playing Daniel Podence and Pedro Neto as sort of two roaming forwards or whatever, which he can do if he plays a back three. So I'm expecting to see that stay. I mean, I don't expect them to go back to a back four for that reason. But even in a back three, they've been supremely successful. So, and they do sit back. So, it's one of those things where we spoke about earlier about how can Spurs break down these sort of teams with sit back. And they are terrific on the counter attack. They've got some really good midfielders. João Moutinho, Ruben Neves are both absolutely brilliant on the ball. And then Podence and Neto are rapid. And I mean, Adama Traore isn't starting games right now. He can come off the bench and wreak havoc as well, even though he hasn't scored or assisted a goal in a while, in over a year, I think. But just his general presence and his ability to get away from players, even if he comes on in the 75th minute, he can change the game in 15 minutes. So it goes back to what we spoke about earlier, whether Spurs will have the creativity and the intelligence to be able to break down not a defensive team, but a team that sits back in a sort of low to mid block like Wolves do.
So, Dre, what's your take on Traore, who much of his creativity or creating dangerous opportunities is on the dribble, right? And is he too reliant on the dribble, or as a player, how would you evaluate him?
Well, when he first was introduced to the Premier League, obviously he had an immediate impact just because of his pace, his strength, his ability to run with the ball. But as with everything, people are going to look to adjust and figure out ways to deal with it. And I think that's kind of what began to happen a little bit. People, sorted out, okay, this is how we should deal with this. And I think at that point, it just becomes more, more off the ball. How can you put yourself in better situations? How can you still have an impact on the game without always having to run with the ball? Which obviously he does amazingly well. So I think it's just, a little bit of adjusting that's going to take place, and he'll be just as effective in scoring and assisting again in no time. He's a phenomenal player. So he'll be hopefully I'd like to see him play. I think he can be very dangerous against Tottenham, because if Mourinho, I think it starts with the lineup. If he doesn't get the lineup right and get the right players on the field who are going to be able to, because we expect them to have the ball, who are going to be able to have the ball and break down Wolves defensively, then they're just going to be essentially kind of, force things and get hit on the counter. And we've seen Wolves countered pretty well. I mean, they just beat Chelsea. Obviously, they lost to Burnley last time out, but they just beat Chelsea 2-1, and they looked pretty good while doing so. So I expect a very similar performance against Tottenham.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating game, because Tottenham does have tremendous athleticism in parts of the back there. So we'll kind of see how that all plays out. Well, why don't we leave the pod there for today? We're sponsored by the Premier League Guide, a fabulous holiday gift for those mad about football. Moneyball for soccer, opposition analysis plus eye candy. The next update is available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. For now, bella ciao, ciao ciao.